Think about the wars that we've seen in our lifetime alone. The greed, the injustice, the oppression. Look at the Northwest Chinese, the Muslim population, the Uyghurs. Look what's been happening to them. You know, many of us have stayed silent. Many of us have done something, but maybe not enough. There's so much injustice and corruption and the destruction of the natural order, the poisons that the seas are being filled with, all the chemicals, and the kind of destabilization of the natural order. I don't even have to go into detail. You know what's been happening around the world. Unless you've been living on Mars, then you have no choice but to understand that there's injustice, there's greed, there's oppression, there's corruption, and there's the destroying of the natural order. And maybe COVID-19 is a wake-up call for us to understand that it's time for us to change. Because Allah says this in the Quran, in chapter 30, verse 41. Corruption has spread on the land and sea as a result of what people's hands have done, so that God may cause them to taste the consequences of some of their deeds, and perhaps they may return to the right path. Again, COVID-19 is not all doom and gloom. It could be an amazing wake-up call from the divine for us to think about, what have we done to deserve this? And that should instill some kind of an awakening so we could start turning back to Allah. Turning back to Allah. And this is why Allah says in the Quran in chapter 13, verse 11, indeed, Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change what's within themselves. Now, people think that this primarily means that if you're in a negative state, you get into a positive state if you change what's within yourself. No, actually, the primary tafsir, the exegesis of this verse is that if you're in a state of goodness and mercy, it will change to something negative if you start sinning more and you start transgressing, basically. And this is very powerful because Allah starts here, He makes the default mercy. But the way we explain this verse, we make the default to be the antithesis of mercy. We're saying, well, if you're in a negative state, you want to change, you want to get into a positive state, individually and socially and nationally, then we need to change what's within ourselves, get better. No, that makes the default negativity. But Allah is saying, no, if you being in a state of mercy and grace and things are flourishing, that's not going to change unless you change what's within yourselves, unless you start sinning and transgressing. So maybe we've entered this negative phase and we've moved away from the phase of mercy and grace because something's changed within us. We became arrogant. We started to oppress. We were unjust. We were greedy. We engaged in war. Or we were silent spectators. We didn't do enough. We destroyed the natural order. We were excessive. We wasted. Allah says Allah doesn't like those who do. Allah does not like corruption. Allah does not like the wasters. We've polluted the earth and the oceans. This is a wake-up call for us to realize. And what's very interesting, non-Muslim journalists have said this. I've taken this from two places. Jean Bull from MSN News on the 6th of April 2020 said something very simple, echoing what we're just saying right now. As tragic as this pandemic is, perhaps it will serve as a wake-up call. Humans have exploited and obliterated natural ecosystems all over the world, replacing biodiversity and balance with extractive industries like factory farming and the live animal trade. Animals caught up in the destruction of these systems are forced from their natural habitats, and with them comes the unleashing of viruses potentially deadly to humans. Similarly, you have Laura Spinner in The Guardian on the 20th of March 2020 in an article called "Is Factory Farming to Blame for Coronavirus?" She says, it is true, in other words, that an expanding human population pushing into previously undisturbed ecosystems has contributed to the increasing number of zoonoses, basically viruses that come from animals, human infections of animal origin in recent decades. That has been documented for Ebola and HIV, for example. But behind that shift has been another, in the way food is produced. Modern models of agribusiness are contributing to the emergence of zoonoses. So exactly what we do, if we're unethical, if we're not following divine guidance, this is what's going to happen. It is inevitable that this is going to happen. And that's why as a Muslim community, we must be closer to divine guidance, the Quran and the prophetic way, and the understanding of our scholars. And we need to also be people who command the good and forbid the evil. This is where we're going to get success. Allah says in the Quran, let there rise amongst you a group of people that would call to the khair, call to goodness. They command the good and they forbid the evil, and it is they would have success. If we want success, we need to call to goodness, command the good, forbid the evil, forbid injustice, forbid corruption, forbid polytheism, shirk, forbid evil, forbid oppression, forbid the destabilization of the natural order, forbid excessive greed, forbid destroying the natural world and not maintaining the balance. Forbid these things. Once we start doing these things, then maybe we could turn to our state of mercy and grace. If we continue the injustice, the oppression, the war, the killing, the greed, then it's exactly what Allah said. It's exactly what Allah said. Maybe this has happened because of what our hands have earned.